So take out your habitat builder and press right click to open the menu and select your corridor. Excellent start, we'll be building in no time. If you move up and down, you'll see that it automatically shows little ghosts of pillars that will come in to support your base. Do keep in mind that these pillars can obstruct things later on in the game, so it's best to start from the bottom of your base first, just to avoid these pillars getting a little bit annoying. Now you can also use the scroll wheel to rotate the tube. Now go ahead and place that down, and one thing to note here is that you don't need all the materials for a construct to place the ghost of it down. You just need one part of it. Let's say 1 titanium, and that will allow you to place a ghost that you can come in and fill in later. The next thing you need, of course, is a hatch. This will let you enter the building. This is considered important for buildings in human culture. Now this will create a vacuum inside of the tube and allow you to step inside. But oopsie daisy, there's no air inside. That's gonna suck, so we have to get some power. Right now, Subnautica has 4 power sources: solar, hydroelectric, thermal, and bioreactors, question mark. Solar is your starter. In direct sunlight, these bad boys pump out 8 power during the day, and at night or down deep, they actually still provide 2 power. It's enough to keep your noob tube oxygenated, but until you unlock power storage to hoard the daytime energy, they're kind of unreliable. So what is reliable? Hydroelectric power. Yes, turns out water power is a good source of power in water. You place these in the big suck-off tunnels, yes, that's their official name, where they generate a constant 12 power per second, 24/7. The catch, these tunnels are not everywhere in the map, so you will have to build relatively nearby to one, and they also cost 3 titanium, 3 silver, and 3 copper, making them more on the expensive side. Not a bank breaker, but it's really going to cost you a lot of silver to spam down 100 of these in your suck tunnel. Then you have the bioreactor. This will require ingots to craft, which means it in total takes 6 titanium and 6 copper, and it takes up indoor space, and it forces you to manually give it plants and fish to power it. Honestly, it's pretty annoying, but it does work in literally every location in the game. It's the ultimate energy backup, and if you chuck enough biofuel in, you can even overclock it to a massive 20 power per second, the highest individually in the game. Unfortunately for you, noob tuber, it won't fit in your tube yet, so that's off the table for now. Finally, thermal power. It costs 3 titanium, 3 copper, and 3 gold, and it's highly situational. Place them right on top of a thermal vent for 16 power per second, or just in the general water, I was going to say air, but that's not right, of the graveyards biome for a solid 12 energy per second, and it's essentially free because it just needs ambient temperature, but it only really works if you're living in this biome or near some of the rare hot caves in the game. So to sum it up, solar and hydro are your go-tos unless you're building in a dark cave or a hot zone. Alright, so your noob tube is powered up and ready to pump oxygen into your eager mouth 24/7, but you can't live in a cylinder your entire life, you're not a Pringle! So let's get into the more advanced building techniques, assuming you've unlocked at least all your basic rooms by this point. If not, enjoy that tube cylinder. Behold, the Cubed Room. What a marvel of engineering, and also a massive pain in your scuba gear clad ass. This room is quite buggy and annoying to work with, but I'm going to try and give you the best advice to use them. You can start off by placing your first room like you would the corridor. Congratulations, you have a cube. This is better than a tube, but right now you still have a noob cube. We must expand our cube to facilitate activities. So you have 2 options here. One, you can take another room and align it alongside the original room and it'll connect automatically, or you can use the new and absolutely infuriating but extremely powerful shrink and grow mechanic. The shrink and grow mechanic also works on this corridor, by the way. So if you come over to the wall, you can use the scroll wheel to change the size of the panel you want to expand by, and then just attach more wall to make the room bigger. But it's not just an outside activity. If you find that you need more room while doing your interiors, you can just push it out from the inside as well, or even pull it in if you find you've got a straggly bit of base you don't know how to use. What happens if you make a cube that is too large and it actually won't let you deconstruct it? Well, that means one of 2 things. Either you've got something inside the cube up against the wall or the ceiling or the floor that you need to remove, or you need to shrink it first in order to bring it down to deconstruction size. Or a secret third option where the game just fucking bugs and it becomes undeconstructible. I love early access games. Anyway, to shrink stuff, press Q to enter the deconstruction mode and then F to shrink your walls. You can then adjust the shrinkage. the same way you do with growing the walls. But one of the most annoying things you're going to have to deal with these cubes is getting them to be the right size, because there's no visible measurement or grid system of any kind in Subnautica 2, and the walls certainly don't have any obvious notches that would make their size obvious. Therefore, my recommendation is simple. Measure using corridors. For example, if I want a perfectly even room, the same length on every side, what I'll do is build it vaguely out to the size that I want it to be, and then place the corridors perfectly side by side like this. Make sure they are actually flush against each other and there isn't any gaps. Then you do the same on the other side, with as many corridors wide as you want it to be, and this will ensure that your base is perfectly balanced to the proportions you want it to be at an easy visual glance. Then, once you've done all that, you remove any of the corridors you don't need, and there you go, perfect room. But what about if you want to add verticality to your base? After all, this game doesn't have any vertical connectors like in previous games, so how do we go up or down? Well, rooms double as this feature, and God, I hope you like climbing ladders if you want to make a very vertical base. Place a room on top of another room to create a vertical shaft. Inside these, you can place a ladder. These are one of the most infuriating things I've ever had the displeasure of working with in a video game. I wish I could give you better advice than looking at the floor and or the ceiling and swinging your camera around wildly until it shows green. But I can't. These are little bastards. The one thing to keep in mind is that they won't link into any non-rooms at all. That includes half rooms. They don't count. Speaking of those half round rooms are the only real option you have for circular additions to your base. There's honestly not much to tell you about these half round rooms because they're actually one of the least customizable modules in the game, alongside nooks, which are larger than standard rooms and protrude out the side of your base, adding a great bit of shape and variation to your design and a wonderful place to put like a desk and a modification station. But from some of the most extremely uncustomizable modules in the game to arguably the most customizable aspect of your base, we have windows. Windows come in 3 sizes, and you can adjust this using the scroll wheel. They can also shrink and grow like other modules, but there's so much fun to have with windows. The 1x1 windows create little portholes, which is how I made those in the base locations video, but you can combine these porthole windows to make slit windows vertically or horizontally, which is a great option for adding natural light without necessarily clouding your base with nothing but massive gaping windows. But there's more. If you select the window in your habitat builder again and hover over any of the corners of your larger base windows, you can actually convert them from rounded windows to straightened windows to give more interest to their shape. And for corridor windows, you can actually do the same to make these interesting thin window things. Which brings me to moon pools. Fun fact, moon pools suck. And I ain't talking about the good suck like the suck off tunnels. What did you think I was talking about? You'll be sitting there about to unlock the tadpole and you just want to make a room to dock it in, and you spend the next hour micro adjusting the floor and then pushing out the walls to fit the dock. It's just a nightmare. The key to a good moon pool that doesn't destroy the look of your base is planning out exactly how much space you're going to need and using that corridor trick I showed you earlier to make sure everything stays symmetrical and even, because it very quickly grows to weird shapes when you're trying to expand for your moon pool. Now, you can place moon pools on the floor of your rooms to be able to dive straight into the water or to dock your tadpole. You can also do it from the outside if you'd like. These can be grown and shrunk like the other modules, but they often get bugged and won't actually shrink or grow in the way that you want them to, meaning you kinda just have to delete them, which is infuriating. You need to make these pretty big to accommodate the hull chassis tadpole, by the way, and fit a dock and a vehicle fabricator. But the big problem is that the tadpole dock will never ever perfectly align with the steps of a corridor, which is just fucking peachy. Therefore, you'll always need to build it off-center from any corridors coming into the room if you suffer the burden of eyes or sanity. But then, the dock will need some floor space to actually fit it in, so you need to leave some space for it. It's not as bad as I'm making it out to be, but it is very fiddly, and the non-alignment of the dock stairs and the corridor stairs is quite infuriating. So when it comes to making your bases look good on the outside, it's important to remember, first of all, that it's all subjective and what you like is probably going to be different from what I like, but here's some good tips, I think, to make them look more interesting at least than what I have on screen right now. Number 1, flat is boring. Number 2, cubes are boring. Number 3, default roofs and walls are boring. How do we fix those problems? Well, problem number 1 is most easily fixed by just making variations in the height of your base. use those rooms to make towers upwards or downwards that take you to new sections of the base. But problem number 2 factors in here as well. See, you absolutely can fit everything you need for a base in a large ugly cube, and that's great if you want your base to look like shit. If you don't, you want to make separate compartments for different things and connect them with proportionate corridors to break up the shape. A good way to think of this is actually quite realistically. Imagine this. Your base is a big cube, and some horrifying demonic monster of the ocean comes over and takes a big bite out of your base. Oops, now everything is flooded and your base is screwed. Now, imagine you separated all your main components out with corridors which have bulkheads on them to block flooding and maintain pressure in different sections of your base. Now, of course, base attack, structural integrity, and bulkheads are not yet in Subnautica 2, but you can make your base look more visually cohesive and interesting by adding these logical additions in your imagination. Now your base looks more like a logical complex with dedicated compartments for sleeping, recreation, power, tadpole base, production, and anything else you want to put in there. A hockey rink, for example. But we still have problem number 3. The default roofs and walls are boring, and you're missing out, I think, on the opportunity to tell a story with your base looking like this. And I don't just mean that to be extremely pretentious. Look at this base. Can you tell me from the outside what any of these sections are actually for? Well, you may guess that the big glass sections are for recreation or looking around, while the more walled off stuff are for rooms with stuff on the walls, or maybe rooms that require privacy like bathrooms. But what about this? These walls with windows show that this room is supposed to be travelled through or sat in rather than exclusively for functional purpose, and they show that these sections are probably less structurally important if they're not made out of the pure titanium. The roofs of these sections have communications equipment and electrical panels, and the walls have aesthetically balanced vents and electrical panels as well. But look at this section. Windows are used minimally, because they're exclusively for orientation and natural light in the case of electrical interruptions or some other disaster. The roofs are riddled with pumps and electrical attachments, with walls scattered with highly functional vents and other associated doodads. It's actually pretty ugly to look at closely, but that's the point. These areas of my base aren't built to look nice and to be pleasing to walk through. In fact, they have bayed interiors and often very scary dark long hallways. But they are functional, and these parts are for my power systems and my production areas, and they are built with the appearance of being functional designs that are made in a more Spartan way rather than being concerned with aesthetics. And while it does look ugly up close, when you zoom out to the full-scale base, you can actually see that it makes a more complete picture of a real ocean colony, where you can have a good idea probably of what everything in this base does just by looking at it. And then of course we have my farming section, and nothing adds colour to your base quite like farms. They're not only really useful for various things you might need, but you can use the grow beds to decorate any bare roofs and ledges that you don't just want to add more panels and antennae to, because there's not that many decoration options right now anyway. So you can use those plants to really spice up the visuals of your base right now. Now you can build them just like any other block with growth and shrinkage, and you can even use that mechanic to create little planters, basically, that are little plant pot additions to your base. It is very tedious, but this is about decorating an endgame base. You're probably done with the game and have nothing else to do at this point anyway. But that's only how you make a cool outside. We have a new problem. The interior looks like this. Well, the first issue is lighting, but there is a problem with lighting beyond it not having any on my base. Lighting absolutely devours your power, and it causes a lot of lag, so beware that this is a bit of a massive endgame luxury. So, what do we have? Well, we get several lighting options, and all of them are very difficult again to align with things because there's no grid system or visual measurement system when you're placing these down. So I would strongly suggest place down as many lights as you want, and then begin straightening them out using landmarks like windows. Like the center of a window is easier to measure against rather than just the ceiling. After lighting, you may want to consider things like interior walls, and these can be placed using similar controls to everything else, and then you can add arches and interior doors to those to add extra elements of interest to them. You can, by the way, adjust the width of those arches as needed as well. I like to use them to make pillars out of the interior walls rather than having any actual interior walls. But honestly, even with the limited interior decoration options in Subnautica 2, in my opinion, you can do a lot with what we have here. First, remember these panels I showed you for the outside? These work inside too and are a great way to fill an empty wall with something other than a functional block or a poster. Speaking of posters, posters are a great way to add a pop of colour to a flat wall in your base. You've also got the bed and chairs. These are great decorative clutter, and you can see I use chairs in every room, but also if you sit or sleep in them, you won't drain any food or water, so you can sit and you can read through any logs you've maybe misunderstood or any databank entries, or just go AFK in multiplayer without starving or dehydrating to death, which is actually really helpful. Now, the only Altera-styled table we have access to is the dining table, but it's quite visually versatile. And there's something I discovered when making this video: you can actually place objects on tables in this game. That is some next-gen stuff right there. Similarly, you can place wall racks on your base that work just like hardpoints on your tadpole. You can place deployable storage, oxygen generators, work lights, and beacons, as well as most of the hotbar tools except for the wake maker on those hardpoints. I love to put these near moon pools as like work equipment you might hypothetically be grabbing in an emergency when you're diving out of your base for repairs or something. You can see I have like a maintenance access point that is just above my hydroelectric stuff, because hydroelectrics are actually not connected to your base in any way other than power transmitters. So I like to put these little maintenance passages with a bunch of emergency equipment where, in theory, if these were ever attacked, you could go down and make fast repairs to them and then quickly get back up into the base. Not strictly necessary, but it adds a lot of visual coolness to my base that makes a lot of sense. You also have bio beds, NOAA nodes, fabricators, and storage containers, which all make great ways to fill spaces. I like to make bedrooms, production rooms, storage rooms, medical rooms with NOAA nodes, bio beds, tables, and lab chairs. And if you really just need to fill a room that you only added for exterior aesthetics, you can make a lab out of just dining tables, lab chairs, bio labs, processors, and storage. It's just a research room, which is an extremely versatile thing to add to a base in this game, because yeah, there's going to be research being done, right? There's a lot you can do with the very small list of items we currently have in this game with just a little bit of imagination. But hopefully that's enough to give you all the stuff you need to know to make your bases really what you want them to be. Except for one thing. Where do you build? Well, turns out I have a video for just that thing, and it'll be popping up on screen right now. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe for that fragment guide I'll make so you don't struggle with finding some of these bafflingly well hidden decorative items.